Hello, everyone, and welcome. Let's just get to the first slide here. Well, welcome to Microsoft Ignite. My name is Sarah Arfston, and today we're going to be going over the Ask the Expert session. In today's session, we're excited to have experts from Microsoft and Intel share their perspective and experience with intelligent manufacturing from edge to cloud. Now, let's go over a couple reminders before we get started. If you have any questions throughout the session, please make sure to type them into the chat. My fellow moderator will be managing your questions. This session may be recorded. Please adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct and keep your questions appropriate inside of the chat. Here's a quick glance at the Microsoft Code of Conduct. Now I would like to introduce my wonderful co-moderators. On the left-hand side, we have Rachel Frick. She's the Marketing Development Manager, and she joins us today from Intel. Rachel will be managing the other questions inside of the chat. On the right-hand side, we have Andrew Tang. He's our Sales Development Manager from Intel. He will manage the chat if we have more questions that arise once the session has been completed. And it's with great honor today that I introduce our panel of experts. On the left-hand side, I'll start with Janine Davidson. She is our IoT Industrial Channels Director from Intel. Then we have Kevin Sullivan, our GBB America's Technical Lead for Manufacturing from Microsoft. Next is David Armour, our Principal Manager for Microsoft, and Mark Taylor, Architect Solutions from Microsoft. Now I'd like to start off today's session a bit more broadly by identifying what are the biggest challenges that manufacturers are facing today. We're going to start with David today. David, would you mind sharing what you see as the biggest challenges that manufacturing companies are facing from your perspective? David, I think we might.
Yes.
Yep, having a tough time hearing you. Thank you.
Yeah, with the pandemic today, one of the things that has really impacted manufacturers is their supply chain. Making sure that they have all of the goods they need to perform their manufacturing, as well as making sure that they can get them out to their customers. Another real big challenge, though, is they really want to look at reducing the number of people that they have in their facilities because they're worried about the health of their employees. One of the ways they're looking at doing that is with video. Are there ways that they can identify things or count things with video and not to have somebody in the plant that would normally have done that?
Wonderful, thank you, David. And do we have any of our other panelists who want to add in a little bit more context or challenges that they're seeing as well? Maybe Kevin or Mark? Oh, Kevin, we're having a little difficulty hearing you.
That might work. Can you hear me now? All right. Yeah, so, long before the pandemic and in general, what I found is especially when you have factories involved and assembly lines and stuff, there's a couple of things. One is they all see the need and identify, hey, if we can work smarter, we can, if there's ways we could detect things like, whether it's, quality defects coming off the line or even if it's people watching. And what I mean by that is, hey, everybody's going to be different, but have the same general theme of we've got safety guidelines, right? Hard hats, safety goggles, certain areas where certain personnel should not be on their phone, for example. No trash here in this area, that type of thing. And essentially a way to detect that. Well, certainly if you've got humans walking around, that's one way to do it. But as David said, that's not ideal. It's not very cost effective. Those humans should be probably doing something a little bit more productive than that. And so what I found is they're looking for those solutions, but at the same time, they're manufacturers. They're not in the business of hiring data scientists. They're not AI experts. And so what they, a lot of times get challenged with is, where do I start? I have no idea even how to begin this thing for using analytics and AI to solve what are fairly simple and elementary problems, but are very valuable, or therefore could be a lot more cost effective if they had a solution for it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Any other additional context from Mark or Janine that you want to add in on the challenges?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one as well, Sarah. I agree. I think Kevin and David both brought up some really good points. And I think it really maps up to companies are needing to be more agile in their production and the goods and services that they are offering out. And so that is one of their biggest challenges that they're faced with. And so then it's really about, okay, to Kevin's point and David's point, then what are the solutions and where are my opportunities within my production and manufacturing facility, as well as mapping it all the way into my supply chain, as to how can I create those business efficiencies and business agility to help produce a better product for my customers while at the same time benefiting from CapEx and OpEx opportunities.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Oh, go ahead, David.
I'll just add on there, one of the interesting challenges with manufacturing is how can I take advantage of the cloud when my facility can't take a dependency on that internet connection. They want to be able to get the advances that they see in the cloud, but they want to have it inside their facility where they can be assured that their factory operations continue, even if there's an internet outage, or they have just really bad latency to the internet. Really, they want to have more of the cloud where the data is being collected and where decisions need to be made.
Yeah, I've seen similar things. Most of what I've been working on are computer vision kinds of scenarios, and a lot of those have been around safety. So things like personal protective equipment, as Kevin was mentioning, ergonomics, different kinds of solutions like that. And I think, to reiterate, I think what somebody said in the beginning, I think computer vision scenarios are one of the kind of hot points right now across a lot of different industries, as well as manufacturing.
Wonderful. These are all challenges that we've heard of multiple times, safety being a big one, internet connection, wanting to be more agile. And one of the comments that Janine brought up is, so where are the opportunities? Where can we dive a little bit deeper to address some of these challenges that have been brought up? Mark, do you want to start us off with some of the opportunities and maybe some solutions that you see for the future and the present of manufacturing?
Sure. One obvious one is around personal protective equipment, which might be especially relevant now, and monitoring for safety conditions. So that's one that we see quite a bit, especially in the computer vision area. But there's if you think of a camera as just a really capable sensor, and intelligent manufacturing kind of being driven by the data from these sensors, there's a whole bunch of other areas where these kinds of solutions can be beneficial. So things like predictive maintenance, monitoring the production line. So factory AI is a good example of part identification. You can also do things like defect detection and quality control. There's a myriad of areas where these kinds of solutions can be super beneficial.
Yeah, I like to call the video kind of a universal sensor, right?
Yeah.
Like a thermometer can measure temperature, but a video camera can also measure temperature, and it can measure a lot of other things as well. It can measure, color, shape, speed, texture, so many things that you can't get with a single sensor. And if you look out in the world and look at all of the PhD research being done, I think very little of it's being done on thermometers, and rather it's really about doing machine learning with video and doing video analytics.
Yeah, I've seen just kind of on the same thing of video analytics, like what you can do. It's interesting. I remember being in a discussion with one customer that, you know, the issue essentially was, and this, I don't think this is anything unique to them, which is, hey, they have a lot of very old but still very usable factory equipment they have investments in. These are millions of dollars worth of equipment, even though they might be 40, 50 years old. And the issue is that there's no electronics on these. A lot of them have, you know, a human has to sit in front of them, and they have analog gauges, right, that show pressure and temperature and all types of things that someone operating it, you know, would be able to tweak some knobs to essentially, you know, assuming that they're watching it at all times, and, you know what to do with whatever actions they have to take. One of the interesting things is like, well, why don't you just put a commodity webcam in front of it, and we'll train a model to look for the gauges in certain positions. And as much as that's like, oh, well, that's AI, and they got to build and train a model, it's really, you know, it's pretty democratized now. Custom AI, the vision AI things we have out on the cloud, coupled with some of the interesting hardware solutions we have at the edge, such as Stack Edge and Stack Hub and even Stack HCI now, you know, make it fairly elementary. You don't need to be a genius data scientist or hire a bunch of very expensive folks to figure that out for you.
Yeah, I would add, Kevin, I think that's an excellent example of creating a fairly simple solution to what would appear to be a very hard complex problem as far as rip and replace. You're not going to rip and replace that old equipment because of that investment that you have there. So how do you deal with that? And that's the reality of most manufacturers, is they are dealing with lines and equipment and that are all installed. And so how do you help them create a digitalization strategy utilizing the investments that they have already in their factories, and how do you build on top of that? And I think, David, you brought up a really good point as well that you briefly mentioned on the cloud as well as edge compute. And I think what gets wrapped a bit into this as well as security is the need for, it's that balance between your computing and where you do it. If you do it on-prem at the device level, how much of the data do you keep on-prem versus sending it to the cloud? And that's the beauty of having that flexible architecture, you know, both at a hardware and software level, then that you can take those solutions and do your computing and analytics where you need it to be, and also address, you know, security issues. You know, a lot of companies, they don't want to send data outside their four walls. So how do you then deal with that as well? I think security is a challenge that a lot of manufacturers are facing, but then there's also really good opportunities and ways that you can address that too.
Thank you for all these points, excellent points. And one of the biggest opportunities and areas for growth that was mentioned is cameras. How can we use cameras within intelligent manufacturing? And one of the comments was, you don't have to be a genius in order to figure out how to operate these and use them for your own system. So with that in mind, I'd like to pass this over to David. David had an on-demand session on manufacturing that's available at any point throughout Ignite that we strongly recommend our viewers here to look into. But David in this video goes over a solution that's easy to use, that could be used to scale out. And so I'd love to just pass things over to you, David, and see if you could explain a little bit of a high-level context on what the solution is and maybe how some of our viewers here today can capitalize on it.
Yeah, thanks. Well, when we started talking to customers that were interested in our Azure Stack family of devices, we really wanted to kind of dig into what is it that is attracting you to these things. And a lot of our manufacturing customers were telling us that they're very curious about video analytics. They view it as an additive thing. You can add cameras without disrupting your existing manufacturing processes, right? You can actually have them outside of the area looking in. And they're very attracted to the Azure Stack devices because they come with GPUs and they're kind of ideal for analyzing large amounts of data through video streams. So they wanted to get started with that. they view video analytics as disruptive, and they're curious about it. But when they start digging into it, they realize that, hey, this comes with, they actually do something with this. I have to build a machine learning model, and I don't know anything about this, and I have to hire a data scientist, and this whole getting started is super hard. In fact, a lot of them told us that it would take almost a month and a large investment to get a data scientist in and set up all the equipment and see what's possible. And sometimes the results weren't satisfactory to them. So we decided that we would really zero in on the problem of how can somebody do a successful proof of concept with video analytics using our Azure Stack devices. And how can they do that in less than a day, maybe a couple of hours? And how can we enable a frontline factory worker to do this proof of concept so that they can show off to their manager without having to bring in some kind of expert to get going on that? So what we did is we took advantage of a number of Microsoft technologies that really, as Mark said earlier, democratizes AI, and one of those is custom vision. And using custom vision, along with a very simple web app that we can run right there at the edge, we're able to guide the user through a process of identifying their parts, which on the back end, we create a model for them, a machine learning model, and send back to their Azure Stack device so that they can go ahead and do detection of those parts. We really wanted to zero in on the parts because a lot of them told us that, hey, that's the thing of value that leaves my facility. So can you really help us with these parts? And one of the challenge in manufacturing is that every manufacturer tends to build their own parts. They're unique in the world. Machine learning, a lot of times people take somebody else's model, but in manufacturing, it's not easy to do that. You have to actually make your own. And so we wanted to really zero in on the whole making the model experience easy for someone who isn't an expert in this area. And so that's what we built. You could go out and have a look at it. It's a very simple process of setting up your camera. Once the camera feed comes through, you can identify the parts that you care about, give them a name. And then from then on, after you've done enough of these identifications, telling the system what this is, the system will start to learn, and it will start being able to do detections of these parts. And as you do more and more identification of the parts yourself, you teach the system to do a better and better and better job of identifying these parts in the future. So it involves that frontline worker into the whole machine learning process, where the worker is teaching the machine learning how to identify these parts in the future.
Hey, David, we've got a question on whether or not you can use existing cameras or if you have to bring specific cameras in to connect into the factory AI tool. You
can use existing cameras. The solution uses RTSB based cameras, so that means they have to have, a network-based connection. And for the demos that I was giving, I used a camera that you can purchase for under $40. It doesn't have to be a super fancy camera. You just have to put in about a half an hour of time to identify the parts to teach the system, and then from then the system can do the identification for you.
I've been noticing we're lit up on the Q&A pane. There's two that I just want to address real quickly. I was going to type out the answer, but I figured it'd just be faster if I just talk to it. That's okay. Yeah. So Stephen, the last one I've got, at least the latest one, is there a process companies use to analyze which workloads move to the edge and which workloads best on a central cloud or solely based on cost? So I wouldn't say there's a rigid specific, this is the process for that, but I will tell you that there's definitely two overall reasons folks are having a need to move their compute to the edge. And yes, absolutely applies directly to this, specific topic we're talking about, which we're doing live video analytics, because there's a lot of speed that's needed there. But just in general, that really the two areas why I would do compute in on the edge versus say up in a region somewhere, say Azure East or West or something, is around data sovereignty laws, right? So it's just, look, there's hard and fast rules of the country that this thing is operating in. I can't exfiltrate data from it. There is no Azure region in there. It's just a roadblock. And so I need to keep all my processing, all my data in the facility or the site where it's at. And the second one is around what I'll call laws of physics, speed of light. It's just too latent. So going back to the video analytics, especially when you start looking at some of these partner solutions we have, or you're going to use this to do like, hey, maybe I need a frame every 10th of a second, right? And then I got to analyze that frame and I got to score it, and then I got to do something with that data, notify somebody of a defect, or I need to do something in pretty as real time as I can make real time. And the nearest cloud, sure, I could put all the solution in the compute and send my score up to Azure, but the nearest Azure region might be 30 milliseconds from me, 50 milliseconds. And so we need to bring that down. And there's obviously sub reasons, but those are really the two that overarch pretty much everything when it comes to why I'm trying to do my compute on the cloud or on the edge versus in a cloud, a public region, physically somewhere else. The second one I was just going to answer real quick is from Cassandra, and that was the one on top of it. How do you work since fear of those that may lose work due to intelligent devices manufacturing? So just a very basic example. So drawing from a one I was involved in with this. This was the safety thing. Part of it was looking for hard hats and people violating things. Well, it was a union shop, and there's very specific rules about identifying people, and it gets really ugly really quick. And so absolutely, with our technology, the ability to not just take a bunch of pictures, which completely identify people because there they are, right? We were under rules to say, hey, if you store any of that data, it's got to be anonymized. And that includes things like blurring out faces, which we absolutely did and had to do, right, to make this work for the customer, because sure, they can say it's a violation, but because of rules, they didn't want to directly pinpoint who exactly that person was. So things like, okay, well, I can give you the picture to show you the example, but it would blur out and anonymize the actual video or visual of that person. So things like that absolutely had to be taken into account. And the nice thing is to implement that was, sure, it was extra stuff, but it wasn't like, oh, I needed to sit down with a coder to figure this out for the next 9 months.
And something I would add to that, Kevin, on that specific question, and I'm not sure this is the direction she was asking, but these really aren't about replacing the worker. In fact, when you talk to manufacturers, they really don't have intention of when they're deploying these solutions, they're not going in with it about how do I get rid of my workforce. In fact, most of them are still forecasting the same workforce. That now the difference is it requires a different skill. So then it's more about a skills training. And so this is where I think it's really important as manufacturers or whomever are looking to deploy any of these type of solutions, you really need to have a wide variety of inputs of voices into that, to where then you can get that buy off. So it's not just a solution that's coming down from up above and that's changing everything, but there's this bottoms up voice and sideways voices coming in as well to look at what are we trying to do and what's the benefits for the company and for the workers and what we're trying to produce as well. So I think it all comes together in that way too.
I want to also add the thing that I demonstrated in my session is really designed to be a proof of concept tool. It's really help you explore what data you can actually get from video analytics. I saw a couple of questions. What can I get from this? It's cameras are really good at doing things like identifying things, counting things, tracking things. A lot of people that we've talked to are very interested in this for doing bottleneck tracking. When like lots of boxes pile up, you know that there's a problem. So this is really designed to be a proof of concept. We do have a number of partners that we work with that have really excellent solutions that build on top of this technology. So this, once you finish the proof of concept, you're going to want to look at ways to increase the confidence level of the detections integrate this data into other systems that you have. I even saw a question about lean manufacturing. So this is data that can actually help your lean manufacturing processes as well. But the tool that we show you is really just a proof of concept to get you started to think about what those possibilities are. And then we can bring in the partners that can really take video analytics to the next level for you. And we have a number of those partners that we work with. If you'd like to find out more, you can go to aka.ms/Azure Stack ISV, and you can see a list of all of the ones for manufacturing there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. And thank you everyone for including questions in the chat today. We had another question that popped up that's asking if there's a process that companies use to analyze which workload moves to the edge and which workload is best on a central cloud. Is it solely based on cost, or are there other factors? Does anyone want to take that one up?
Kevin, I think you touched upon a few points on that earlier.
That's the one I was answering. So
okay,
you want to go ahead and restate a couple of those?
Just very quickly in summary, it comes down to speed of light physics reasons and or laws of the land reasons. I can't because of governing laws that say thou shalt not move the data to somewhere else. And a lot of times, not all the time, most of the time, that's because of the country that we're operating in or trying to operate in.
Wonderful.
And I would also, it could be security reasons as well, that you don't want your data to leave your premise is a big one, as well as then the other one, I think, Kevin, that you mentioned earlier, which was kind of along that speed of light. You don't have time to send the data up far away and come it back down, because those milliseconds can matter, especially if you're talking some sort of vision analytics solution that Dave was talking about. If you're doing defect detection, you need those results really fast so you can make those changes, on the fly. You don't have that time. So latency.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I also want to bring up the question, what solutions are available today? What can some of our audience members be looking at right now that's available?
Great. So I can take that. First of all, you can check out the Factory AI solution that we have. You can find that at aka.ms/factoryai, all Factory AI, all one word. And that will lead you to the GitHub repository where you can go and install this and set it up and try it out. We have a number of partners that we work with that specialize in delivering, using the same technologies we use in Factory AI, but at a much higher level of detection confidence, the ability to integrate it with other systems. And you can find those on the site that I mentioned earlier, which is aka.ms/Azure Stack ISV. And you can find those partners there.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And maybe we can include some of those URLs and post them in the public chat so that our audience viewers can click on them for a later time. I know we're running out of time here. I want to open it up if there's any other closing thoughts before we wrap up today's session.
This is Kevin. I'll start. Thanks for having us today. And I know that 30 minutes is never, well, even if it was an hour, it never seems long enough. But I'd say this. I mean, if you haven't already checked out David's video, please do. It is about this Factory AI. And this is, by the way, it is something that's available. Even if you don't do, we kind of talked around it, but we do have these hardware things that you can acquire, such as the Azure Stack Edge. You can order one up from an Azure subscription, and boom, you've got a piece of hardware with all these wonderful things on it. That Factory AI solution is kind of built for that, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need one necessarily even use it. It's out on GitHub, and you can make use of it. I would say also keep your eye, if I'm sure there's on-demand videos, and I think they may have already happened, or they might happen tomorrow or the next day. Keep an eye on the space. Look for things for Stack HCI, Azure Stack Hub, Stack Edge, and Stack HCI. lots and lots of awesome announcements specifically this week at Ignite about some of the evolution of things, some things that we were talking about, roadmap items back in November that are now reality. So I'd urge you guys to check those out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Any other additional thoughts? Janine, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's really about the power of the ecosystem. So, Microsoft and Intel, we both have a very strong ecosystem. We work very hard to create our ecosystem of partners together. And so, especially for our end users that are out there, please, per some of the links that David mentioned, that it sounds like we'll get out to everyone, take a look at those partners out there, because when you really get into deploying these new kind of solutions, you'll probably be wanting to bring in a new solution partner that might be outside of the realm of who you used to work or that you're used to work with, to bring in and work with you then in this new kind of environment.
Perfect. Thank you, Janine. And I'll wrap up here and just want to give a big thank you, everyone, for attending this session. A big thank you to all of our experts and my other moderators. We couldn't have done this session without you. The link that was mentioned previously for the manufacturing session is here on this slide. We also have other sessions that you're able to watch on demand for healthcare and retail. You can find out more on myignite.microsoft.com and more of our joint Intel and Microsoft sessions. Thank you again for joining us. Feel free to include more questions in the chat and enjoy the rest of Ignite. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.